Hey, I hope you're having a wonderful day because I know I am, and it's even better now that you're here with me. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tack Bodybuilding. Today I'm going to be co-hosting with the one and only Kodak Black. Say hi, Kodak. What's up, motherfucker? But really, what we need to discuss here before we start this podcast is the fact that some of these videos are getting 10,000 views and I still only have 7,000 subscribers. Does that make sense to you, Kodak? No, it doesn't. Even he disagrees. So the math ain't mathin', guys. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you put on post notifications as well if you want. I don't know how much of a fucking deal that one matters, but also make sure that you like the video if you are enjoying these podcasts and learning anything from them, getting some insight, whatever it is. I really do appreciate the support, guys. But without further ado, let's jump right into it. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Tack Bodybuilding. I'm here with Adam. It's been a while since I've done an episode. It's been a while since you were on too. I think the last one we did was with Nas, right? Nas and Jesse.
Either that one or with John. I don't know which one was after.
John was after that one, actually. I think.
That was
Yeah,
the last one.
yeah. Which was actually like almost a month ago. Wow. Okay.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. What have you been doing?
I've been bulking. I've been
Yeah.
training, doing school, just same shit, just more.
You said
Um,
you're the heaviest you ever been right now.
yeah, I'm like 216 at 5'8". So
Wow, you're fucking 20, more than 20 pounds, 20 pounds heavier than me right now.
yeah.
The same height, same height. Yeah, dude. I was looking at my fucking pictures because I did check-ins this morning, and I look like shit. I mean, obviously, but it's like I was just looking at like what I looked like before I stopped my last check-in, like 3 months ago, and it's fucking insane. Like I thought I looked like shit then, but I'm looking at it now, I'm like, wow, I looked fucking insane. I look like shit now.
Yeah, that's always how it is. Like even after like a whole prep, and then you look back at the pictures of you when you're shredded. Back then, you didn't think you looked that good, but when you look back at it, once you look not as good, it's like, fuck, I did look good.
Yeah, yeah. You're always fucking with your head. Body dysmorphia. Imagine we start. Nah, we can't talk about body dysmorphia.
Too long of a podcast to do that.
Make a whole podcast about body dysmorphia in bodybuilding.
3 hours long.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna make this one. We're gonna try to make this one a short one compared to the other ones that have all been 3 hours long. Even though you guys have not, you seem to not have a problem with it. But today we're gonna cover meal plans versus if it fits your macros. So let's just get right into it, man. What do you want to start off with? I guess we should first start off by saying, what exactly is a meal plan? How would you define a meal plan to somebody?
Well, I'd say it's obviously a more strict way to diet. The main difference I'd say between a meal plan and IIFYM approach, and those are kind of like the extremes of rigid meal plan and all out just track the macros. There is the common ground of flexible dieting, but a meal plan I would say is, there's a time and place for it. Like in a contest prep, eating meal one is this amount of chicken, this amount of rice, this amount of vegetables, and that's can work better for some people. And
Yeah. So a meal plan is a structured diet. A meal plan is just you eat this every day. It's what you give your clients. You give them a meal plan. So 6 ounces of chicken, 200 grams of rice, everything is weighed out, to the exact portions. This is what you eat this time. This is your pre-workout meal. This is your post-workout meal, all that stuff. And then if it fits your macros is basically the opposite of that.
I mean, it's still structured in a way. You still have macros to follow, but that's the only structure there really is. So you're
Well, with if it's your macros, in a general sense, because we're not talking about somebody, I guess we'll get into that, but like in a general sense, if it fits your macros, all we're saying is hit these macros: 200 grams protein, 200 grams carbs, 50 grams fat, whatever the fuck it is. Doesn't matter how you get them in, doesn't matter when you eat them, just as long as you hit this number in this caloric intake, you're hitting your macros, which is like the original like Weight Watchers approach.
yeah, similar to that. Yeah, like just hit this amount of points basically. And I mean, when I first started, I learned from bodybuilding.com and from YouTube videos back in like 2014, 15, and IIFYM was very popular back then because people were making these protein pop tarts and protein pizzas and all these things to hit your macros. When if that's your goal, if that's the way that you're trying to diet, then you got your mind in the wrong place. If you're trying to be a bodybuilder, that should not be your goal with trying to make your diet as fun as possible if you're trying to
Yeah.
be a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you're just trying to like lose weight, then that's where it can make more sense.
Well, it just comes with a lack of, it's like I want to say lack of discipline because it is a fucking lack of discipline. It's a very lazy way to do it. If you're somebody who's trying to competitively bodybuild, like your mindset's already trash, you're not going to go far. But I don't want to say it's like a lack of discipline to like the 300-pound lady that's trying to lose weight. Like at least she's being structured to that extent.
Exactly. And they can still lose weight following an IIFYM approach where they're eating whatever carb source, whatever protein sources, whatever fat sources they want. It's just more for bodybuilding. It doesn't really make sense. It's more for someone like the 300-pound lady that wants to lose weight, but also wants to enjoy the fun foods every day.
Yeah. So I guess let's start talking about why it doesn't make sense, right? So let's first cover meal plans, right? So with the meal plan, we have a structured diet. It's outlined throughout the day when we're going to eat. There might be some flexibility in there, right? So, you know, you have your pre and post meals revolved around this. Meal two doesn't maybe necessarily need to be in that order. You know, maybe we could move that around. But within a meal plan, there's reasons for the foods being there, and you're trying to optimize every aspect that you can in order to optimize growth. It's not as simple as just hit this number at the end of the day, no matter how you hit it. You know, that's not how you build muscle. It's a very surface level understanding. And like a beginner, a newbie is going to see gains no matter what they do. So you'll hear like newbies say, oh, I followed it for your macros and I grow. It's like they could have fucking done anything and grew. But if you're somebody who's actually trying to take this seriously and optimize muscle growth, or even if you're in a prep and trying to get as shredded as you can, all those little details, your timing, your nutrition timing, the foods that you're consuming, the quality, all that stuff is extremely important.
Definitely. For bodybuilding, a meal plan is what makes the most sense. Now, you can also talk about an off season versus a contest prep, because you do kind of want to have some flexibility allowed in an off season, depending on the person. Some people are just going to go mentally insane, eating the exact same 5-6 meals a day for forever. If they're bulking, they need to make their food a little more appealing, you know, depending on the person. Some people, you know, can just eat the exact same thing every single day for forever and not complain about it. In a contest prep, though, now you have to take
wait, before you even move on, because what you just said there, I think, like, yes, there are people who like need that variety, right? People who just cannot stick to a meal plan, even in an off season, right? But that person is never going to be a successful bodybuilder.
It depends, you know. And also what I'm saying is not changing it every day. I'm saying, like, for me, for example, if I'm eating, like, this is exactly what I did. I had ground beef, eggs, and rice for my first meal every single day for the longest time. And then eventually I just got tired of the ground beef, rice, and eggs, and I wanted to switch the rice to sourdough bread. So then I just switched to sourdough bread. I just had the same amount of carbs from sourdough, and then I just stuck with that. So I just made a change to my meal plan rather than every day making a change like that, because then you're kind of also not going to be able to see the same amount of consistency with your calorie intake, and it's going to be harder to see progress, especially from a coaching perspective.
Well, with that, what are you gonna say?
That's my way of making my diet more flexible and still being able to, you know, pursue my bodybuilding goals.
Yeah. But with that being said, though, you know that you can digest sourdough bread well.
Yeah.
So that's important too. Like, people will switch out foods all the time, and like now that we create digestive problems, and now that fucks with their appetite, they feel lethargic, and that ultimately affects how they're able to push food, how they're able to absorb the nutrients efficiently, that's going to affect everything in the long run. It's like a compound effect, right? That's why that's like the whole thing with if it's your macros, right? You have guys eating different foods every day to try to hit these macros, and they just have a horrible digestion, a fucked up gut. But then also it's different when we're talking about necessarily carbs, right? You know, it's not like you would switch out your chicken for fucking protein cereal.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so much variance within that. I think making your diet more flexible that's the way that I was thinking about it, is being able to switch out foods that you know digest well, that don't have a bunch of extra bullshit ingredients. That's kind of the way that I like to think about diets, is having a food bank. And that's what we're going to get into, is the flexible dieting approach, where if you want to change your meal plan of what you eat every single day to better suit your preferences, I think that's more beneficial than eating a meal plan every single day where you hate the food, you aren't enjoying it, it makes you want to puke, whatever it is. So making your food, especially in an off season, you want to make your food taste good. And so if you're getting really tired,
it's like what you're saying, there's a lot that goes into it, because it's like you could say, you know, you hate your food, but like maybe it's not like you hate chicken. You just fucking suck at cooking chicken. Like, you need to learn how to cook chicken better, use different sauces. Like, you could stick theoretically to the exact same meal plan every day and just cook every meal differently and make it taste fucking bomb. You really could. And you don't really need to throw in all these different foods. And then also it's like, you need to have some sort of education onto how like nutrition works, right? You know, you wouldn't sub, you know, rice out for a bunch of fucking fructose. You know, you wouldn't do that.
No, so what I'm saying is following a meal plan every single day, eating the exact same thing every single day is what a bodybuilder should be doing
Yeah, of
for
course.
as long as
But I'm saying
possible.
what you're saying, in order for somebody to do that, they need to have a base understanding of nutrition in order to do that effectively.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And they need, you're saying they need to have a base understanding of nutrition in order to make changes to their diet and
Yeah,
like,
so it's like if we
yeah,
have the set 6 meals a day,
yeah,
you're saying you just subbed out your rice for sourdough bread or whatever, and somebody might take that and say, oh, I could just, maybe like after doing this for long, I'll just switch my carbs out for this, my protein for that. But it has to make sense. It can't just be
yeah,
any random source. It can't just be like I'm
yeah,
switching
Pop
out
Tarts,
my oatmeal for fucking
Pop Tarts.
yeah, Pop Tarts, I guess. Pop Tart. People
Yeah.
do eat Pop Tarts pre workout. I don't know if I'm, you know, really gonna vouch for that, but
I don't like having a bunch of sugar before I train. Just a
do you do
huge
Rice
spike.
Krispies? Do you do Rice Krispie treats?
I've done it before, and like it depends on the workout that you're also gonna have. Like if you're gonna go train arms and you haven't eaten in a while and you want just like a quick little bump in carbs, then yeah. But also Rice Krispie treat, I think is gonna digest a little bit slower than something that's like pure, just like sucrose, like candy.
Sucralose, yeah. Well, sucralose.
No,
I talked about
sucrose,
this.
like
I
actual
talked
white sugar.
sucrose.
Yeah, like just white
Okay.
sugar.
Yeah. I talked about this today on a TikTok I made because I was talking about using cluster dextrin intra workout. And I touched on, how like, I don't know if you don't do this, right? Where you eat candy during your workout.
When I was a powerlifter back when I was like 17, 18, I did.
See, what people don't understand is like when you're drinking like an intra workout drink, like cluster dextrin or even dextrose, thing about dextrose is like it will cause an insulin response and you could potentially have like a blood sugar crash from that. So cluster dextrin really has like a slower release so that you have a sustained energy release, but it's fast transit, doesn't have stress on the GI tract. If you're eating candy throughout your workout, you're not digesting that. Like you're not gonna, it's not getting processed, and you're getting like this readily available glucose to fucking get a crazy pump.
Well, is that plus you're also taking away from your pump because now you got more blood going to your stomach to digest the actual food
Yeah.
rather than going into your biceps when you're doing bicep curls.
So this is
So
what I mean. People need to have an understanding of nutrition because somebody's just like, I just need fast acting carbs, so I'll just eat fucking candy. It's like no.
yeah, and we're drinking a
But
protein shake while you're training instead of EAAs, where
yeah,
now it's gonna take
why would I
longer to
use the EAAs?
digest.
I could just drink protein. Yeah, have fun fucking digesting that while you're training.
Yeah, especially on like a leg day.
Yeah, no.
So
And then see, there's so many things we can get into here. Okay, first of all, let's just nail down the points of a meal plan so we can get this through. So within a meal plan, I'm just gonna bullet point this through. You're more consistent within your diet, so there's less room for error. It's the same thing with training. When you're trying, especially when we're pushing food in off season, you're adapting, you're building an adaptation to food, you're acclimating yourself to be able to build more. So if you're constantly changing things around, you're never going to adapt. And you're also not going to know if you digest something well or not. You're also going to always have quality food choices in place. You're going to know that you're having, good quality sources of protein, quality sources of fats, and they're going to be timed accordingly to where they make sense. You're not going to accidentally have a bunch of fat in your pre-workout meal because you decide to have something with peanut butter. This is all planned out and mapped accordingly. You don't have to
Well, that
fucking try
also
to.
affects your training also. So if you're
Yeah.
like just following macros for the entire day and you're having like all of your fats pre-workout, or you're just moving all the carbs and everything everywhere, that's also going to affect your energy levels. That's going to affect your training performance. Could
Yeah.
also affect your recovery. So that's another reason why the meal plan is usually a better idea for bodybuilding.
Yeah. Well, the meal plan, like I said, has everything mapped out. So nutrient timing is accounted for, and you know how your day is going to go. You're going to have this meal pre-workout, this like around this time before. Doesn't always have to be like exact time, but like around when you're going to eat it, and you just know like how things are placed, and that's how it just works the best way. You also don't have to focus on always trying to track something, or you're like, oh, because if it's your macros,
Yeah.
you always hear this if it's your macros. You always see the fucking memes when it's fucking 11 o'clock and you still have to eat 200 grams protein. Like that's never going to fucking happen if you have a meal plan. And if you end up in that situation, you're already doing shit horribly to
Yeah,
begin
exactly.
with.
Yeah.
So
No, and also it's easier. Like you don't have to think about it. When you have a meal plan, that's another thing is like decision fatigue. Is if you're thinking, oh, what do I want to eat for this meal? What like you have to track it, and it's just so much extra work, so much extra thinking. Versus if you have a meal plan, it just takes away that thought process of like, what do I want to eat? Like you know what you have to eat, and if you're meal prepping, also it's way easier, and it might actually help somebody stick to their diet better because now you get home and you have a meal already in the fridge versus being like, oh fuck, I have to cook, or
I
and then
think
you
it's also more cost effective too because you know what you're going to eat instead of random. I'm going to get Chipotle or I'm going to try this food today. You end up spending money on random shit to just try to test out foods, and it's just more efficient. It's more efficient for reaching your goals. You have a strategic plan in place. You know how to follow it. You know how to be disciplined with it, and you can revolve your schedule around it as well. And everything is just in place for a reason. And something you brought up that I don't know if you want to touch on here is talked about how it helps with regulating dopamine.
Well, yeah. So one reason why people want to follow the IIFYM approach, especially, the person who's the 300-pound lady, they have a deeper problem than just overeating. It's a psychological problem where they're dependent on dopamine. And we see this everywhere. We see with drug addicts, with video game addicts, with everything, and with food addicts, especially. That's why people are fat, because they're addicted to food. And so if now you're trying to lose weight, and nicotine addicts, and now if you're trying to lose weight, but you're still chasing the dopamine, you have your vision in the wrong direction. You
Mhm.
should be looking at trying to accomplish a goal versus, oh, what can give me the most dopamine?
Yeah.
So
Well, the thing is, people put food on a pedestal. They fucking food so high. I can't live without my fucking Twinkies or whatever. They just
yeah.
they have programmed themselves to not be able to live without these things, and
Well,
it creates a
one benefit of following a meal plan, and I think this is what I was saying earlier, is it'll regulate your dopamine levels.
yeah.
So not having these huge spikes in dopamine from like eating this pizza and this protein pop tart and whatever it is, like obviously you're gonna get more dopamine for the real thing, but having just regular foods that still taste good. You don't want your food to taste bad, but just normal, healthy foods, chicken and rice, beef and rice, things like that. You're not gonna have these crazy spikes in dopamine, especially with really everything. With
Yeah.
I'm not get into that, but you will eventually stop craving those types of foods if you stick with the meal plan of normal foods for a long enough period of time.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great point because, well, I don't want to say that's not true if you're like deep in a deficit, if you're like in prep, you're gonna have those
Yeah.
cravings. But if you're pushing food, like when I'm in my routine, when I'm pushing food, I'm in off season, I don't have cravings. Like I'm not craving random shit. But if I go off my diet, I start having like snacks in here and shit, those cravings start boosting up crazy. And then it becomes a vicious pattern.
Yeah, it's a whole cycle. Yeah. So like I did the same thing. I've done it many times where like something will happen where I end up going out to eat. It's a celebration, whatever. Then the next day I start craving more of those foods. My brain's like, oh, I was able to go out and eat this really good food or have this dessert. Now I already did that. Now I want to eat that again. But having that discipline, I just go back on my normal diet the next day. But that craving is there because I just did that. So then
Yeah.
I stick with my diet for the rest of the week, and then those cravings go away.
Yeah. And it's also not to say that you can't have like cheat meals. Like on a meal plan, you could definitely have a strategically planned cheat meal. You could have it like on a specific day, whether it's an off day or a fucking training, whatever, however you want to do. I'm not going to get into all that right now, but you can have that. And then that way some people will be more disciplined because they have that to look forward to. It's like their break. I earned this now. Now I could go out to get a nice burger and then I'm back on my diet. You're working for this to get that release, and then you get it, and it's like a sense of accomplishment rather than just being able to fucking freely do whatever you want all the time.
And like what you're saying, so if you're looking forward to this and this is a planned cheat meal that you're going to have at the end of the week, whether it's every week, every other week, you it's not you're not going to have a feeling of guilt associated with it
Yeah.
versus if you had a long day, you had a long weekend or whatever, and now you got a little lazy, you're feeling a little down on yourself, you're lonely, whatever the reason is, and then you're like, oh fuck, I just don't want to cook, I'm just gonna go out to eat and get this shitty food, and then you feel guilty. That's
Yeah.
going to make you feel guilty the next day, and then that's going to repeat that cycle. And that's when you shouldn't have a cheat meal, is when you're feeling down on yourself and when it's not planned. So I think there is a difference between having a planned cheat meal and an unplanned cheat meal. And I think the planned cheat meal is going to be a lot more beneficial and not cause you to continue to crave and go down that cycle of wanting the next day and the next day and the next day in a bulking phase, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it does need to be planned strategically. And it also, there's a lot of variance that goes into it. It all depends on the person, their genetics, where they're at, their food's at, if they're going to want to have a big cheat meal, then we need to probably restrict some caloric intake on that day for that, if we know that's going to happen. So everything has to be planned accordingly. I just don't want people to hear this and think like, oh, I can just have a cheat meal now. And like, they're not actually like think about the big picture.
Yeah, no, like for me, right now, because I'm pushing food and I'm also at a higher body fat percentage, I don't need cheat meals. Like I'm not incredibly insulin sensitive to where I can absorb all the carbs from a huge cheat meal in my muscles. Like I'm gonna store some of this fat if I have a huge cheat meal. So
Mm-hmm.
if I do go out, which happens, I say right like around once a month right now, I'm gonna get something pretty clean, not too high in carbs, high in protein, and it's just more of just like a mental break or having fun with friends or whatever it is. And that's a cheat meal for me. I'm not going to be going out and just binging on a bunch of food because I know for a fact I'm going to store that as fat. So for someone in my position, it wouldn't make sense to try to plan in those types of cheat meals because I don't need it physically or physiologically, and I don't really need it mentally.
Yeah,
So
I don't think anybody really needs the cheat meal per se physiologically.
uh
I think
like,
if you're gonna strategically plan a meal plan, especially in an off season, it's definitely like just for like a psychological
yeah,
aspect from it.
totally.
Because at that point we would just have like a fucking higher carb day or whatever.
Yeah. No, physiologically, I'm just talking about like
Yeah.
get carving up for a show. That's
Uh,
what
yeah. So we established meal plan is superior, but why could a meal plan? In what aspect should a meal plan be inferior? Really, I can't think of anything besides the fact that some people are just fucking can't stick to it because it's too boring for them in a sense. But then
yeah,
that just comes back to them learning how to be more creative with the meal plan. We can completely avoid that if it's structured properly.
and making their food taste good. So the reason, like, I make some cooking videos on TikTok and Instagram here and there because I've learned how to make my foods taste really good. I've cooked the rice and the beef in a pan, put the sauce in there, let the rice soak up the sauce, season it with all these special seasonings, put some nice vegetables in there. I make the food taste good, and I want to show people you can make your boring foods taste good so they actually want to eat them so you can stick to your diet and make progress. Versus back when I was like 18 doing my first contest prep, I was eating baked plain chicken and rice and frozen microwave broccoli with just Frank's Red Hot. That was my meal. I was eating that 4 times a day, every single day, and it
Yeah.
was it was okay. I ate it, but like I was like, I know I can make this taste a little better. But making your meals taste good is how you can make your meal plan. And that's the only con of a meal plan is it's boring and monotonous. So you can mitigate that con by making your food
But
taste
it's
good.
like that's kind of like a fucking is a metaphor the right word? Like it's like a metaphor for life, man. Like if you want to be successful at anything, like you're gonna do boring, monotonous shit that you don't want to do in order to get where you want to go. Like you want to fucking become a millionaire, be a CEO of a company, like you're gonna do a lot of boring shit that you don't want to do. It's not just fucking I do whatever I want to have fun. Like you have to do this shit if you want to achieve this physique.
Exactly. It's not gonna be fun the entire way up, but you know it's gonna pay off in the future.
Yeah. It doesn't mean it has to be dreadful either. It's just you doing things more strategically. But now let's talk about if it fits your macros. If it fits your macros, I think got really big because of fucking Greg, because of Greg and his stupid fucking cookbook and all the stuff. And everybody just thinks, oh, I could have all these random foods now and hit these macros and just have all this variability within it. But like, why? What is the downfall of that? Let's talk about that.
Well, from a
Let's
bodybuilder,
let, let's talk about the pros first. Let's get the let's get
you know,
into that.
it can make your diet more fun. It can make it easier to adhere to, depending on the person. If your two options are you don't have a set diet whatsoever and you're just getting fat or staying fat, and your other option is eating foods that still taste really good and give you that dopamine that you need from food, but it's in an organized manner to where it's actually hitting macros, that's the better option. And if following a strict meal plan where your cooking abilities suck, if that's not an option for you, then go with the IIFYM approach.
The thing is, it's like I really can't think of it actually ever being better because there's just so much wrong with it. But it's like you could saying like you take like a grandma for example, like the Weight Watchers girl, like she's not gonna fucking meal prep and like dude, like they're not gonna do it. So like how do we encourage them to get more fit into shape? It's like okay, like have more freedom, track your calories, hit these numbers. But with that being said, it's so hard to be accurate. You're never going to be accurate. So this shit's almost always wrong, especially when they're like, when they do it the way when they go out, they would go out, get pizza, then put it in a fucking MyFitnessPal app for pizza. Like that's just not accurate. It's not even close to accurate.
No,
Like you have no idea what
no.
you're eating.
You think
So
the people in the back are measuring the fucking amount of oil they're putting on, amount of cheese they're not measuring that shit
no,
at all.
yeah, it's like 200 calories a slice. No, absolutely fucking not. What are you talking about? But there's just so much room for error within it. But I guess if we're just taking like the person who's really just like not going to follow a meal plan no matter what, like it's better. It's better than them not doing it, right? So in that case, I guess you can make a case for it. But now let's talk about all the shit wrong with it, right? So poor digestion, no nutrient timing in place. It's hard to adapt to build upon.
Yeah. I'd say the biggest downfall of it would be uh, it's just not accurate. So the amount of calories that are listed on foods, which we already kind of talked about with the pizza example, but even in like packaged foods, it'll say these are the macros of this food, this is the amount of calories. But the FDA allows people to, or allows these food companies to round the amount of calories. So if you're just tracking calories, then it's definitely going to be off. But also, the amount of calories that are in a food don't necessarily aren't always the same in terms of how your body will absorb them.
Yeah.
So, you can take into consideration fiber. Like if you have more fiber in a food and the same amount of carbs, it's going to absorb differently. And then also just the bioavailability of the nutrients. So let's take protein, for example. Your body's going to respond in the long term. Let's take a 10-year span. If you're eating all of your protein from pea protein versus steak or chicken, you're going to build more muscle from the steak or chicken in the long term because it has more essential amino acids. It's a more complete protein. So yeah, it might have the same amount of protein. Macros might be the same, but your body's not going to use it the same way.
Should we touch on that? I feel like I've talked about that so many times, but every time I talk about it, it's like people have never heard about it, about fucking protein quality.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be every single topic. There's going to be new people that have never heard this thing before.
All right, let's run through it real quick. Basically, this is the benefit. This is why meal plans matter. You have nutrient timing. You want protein synthesis. You want to keep protein synthesis higher than protein degradation. This is how you build muscle, right? In order to do that, you need to have sufficient amino acid profiles within your protein. In order to get sufficient amount of amino acid profiles, you need to have quality sources of protein. So red meat, eggs, chicken, fish, all the whole good foods you think of, not fucking Kodiak cakes, not Kellogg's protein cereal, not that shit. It's not going to have sufficient amino acid profiles in it. And even if it's from whey concentrate in it, because people will say, oh, it has whey in it, we don't know how much of that is actually in there. And for the amount of whey that's in there, 8 grams per fucking serving, it's not going to be enough amino acids within that serving to even stimulate protein synthesis. So again, it doesn't matter. So with that being said, in order to maximize muscle growth, you need to be frequently eating these quality sources of protein throughout the day. It doesn't matter about just the number of protein if it's not coming from sufficient sources in frequently placed throughout the day accordingly. So good.
Now let me add to it. Okay. So if you take, let's say, 10 grams of protein, that is weight. 10 grams, you can weigh that on a little digital scale. You can have those proteins, which proteins are just clusters of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. So if you have, let's say, these non-essential amino acids, or you have some essential amino acids, but not all of them, you're not going to be able to trigger as much muscle protein synthesis because I'm sure people have heard of branched chain amino acids or BCAAs. Leucine specifically is the amino acid that triggers muscle protein synthesis. And the other essential amino acids are required for being those building blocks for muscle protein synthesis, the buildup of muscle tissue. So as you train, you're going to break down these muscle proteins, and you need these amino acids to go into the muscle to create new muscle proteins, actin and myosin. And so if you're not eating enough of those building blocks, you're not going to have enough anabolism, enough muscle protein synthesis. So especially leucine, you're not going to find it in peanut butter and spinach in high amounts compared to meat. That's why peanut butter, I hate when people say it's a protein source. It is not a protein.
It's not.
It has protein, sure, but that 3 grams of protein, not only are you getting 8 grams of fat with it and this amount of carbs with it, but also the actual 3 grams of protein is going to be, let's say, methionine, histidine, and tyrosine, versus this 3 grams of protein from steak is going to have, let's say, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, the branched chain amino acids. So that's my opinion.
But you want all the essential amino acids.
You want all the essential amino acids. And also, I guess, to explain a complete protein means it has all the essential amino acids. So there's 20 or 21 total amino acids, depending on how you ask. There's 9 essential amino acids, meaning that your body doesn't produce those on its own. It needs to get it from food. Non-essential amino acids means your body produces it on its own, but you can still get it from food, and it can still be used to create new proteins elsewhere in your body, organs, skin, hair, things like that. So
that's also why we take essential amino acids intra-workout for all those people who always want to argue against it. Because another thing is, we don't know if there's factors that go into this, and we're not going to be able to tell you a specific answer as to how long protein synthesis is going to outpace protein degradation every time. You know, how much protein did you eat? What are your genetics? What is your thyroid function like? Do you just burn through shit faster than somebody else? You know, what the timing of when you eat, it could be 2 hours, it could be 4 hours. So when we have this space of when we're working out, you know, when did you eat your last meal before right now, before you fucking went to go train?
So what was the meal?
What time did you eat? Like, how long ago did you eat before you ate your post-workout meal?
Let's see. I ate at 2, 2:30, and then I trained at like 4, and then just got back at like 6:30, and then I just ate at like 7:30.
Okay, so we have 5 hours there without eating protein. Do you think protein synthesis was higher than degradation that entire fucking time?
No,
Exactly. So that's what
especially
people
because
don't.
train.
That's what
Training
people.
literally is protein degradation.
That's what people don't understand. So that's why we have amino acids is to keep. It's not going to make a major difference at the end of the day, but pennies after dollars. And that's what bodybuilding is attacking every angle as much as you can to get that advantage. And, over a 10-year span, the guy who had those amino acids versus the guy who didn't, and let's say they have theoretically the exact same genetics, that guy's probably going to have a little bit better results over that time span.
It's the guy that, does the little details, the things that don't really matter. The guy that's doing those things and the things that you're doing, he's going to make more progress in the long run because,
Yeah.
as you said, pennies add up to dollars. So it's also just about the mentality of, yeah, it might not make a big difference, but it's in the right direction. It's in the direction that I want to go. So if I have the choice between drinking EAs intra-workout and not drinking EAs intra-workout, why would I not? Just because it's not necessary? I mean, what if it could help?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a minimalistic mentality versus, giving everything you all. And a minimalistic mentality will never be a champion.
Yeah.
But then we're talking about somebody who wants to pursue bodybuilding now versus maybe the average guy who just doesn't give a fuck. And if you don't give a fuck, hey, whatever,
Yeah, you don't need it. You can build muscle without EA. It's totally fine.
But also, with that being said, I forget what you said about. So let's say, because we always run into this problem with if it's your macros, the guys, they don't space their nutrients out accordingly. Because when you're following if it's your macros, like people usually aren't thinking for the most part. I'm sure there's people are out there that if you can attack if it fits your macros in an educated approach, but it's just going to be it's more tedious. It's just more work, and I think it's stupid to do. But most people are just trying to fit random foods in. That's why we see all the guys. At the end of the night, I have to get 200 grams protein in. So they're going that whole day with protein degradation being higher than synthesis. So I don't want to say that they're losing muscle, because if you're in a surplus, I don't think you're not going to lose muscle, but it's like you're definitely having a huge disadvantage to what you could be, how much you could be building.
Yeah, we can't measure it. It's just the thought process of
you're going the whole day without having protein synthesis
versus I'm constantly giving my muscles the building blocks that it needs to continue muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah.
It's gonna make a difference in the long run is my opinion, but we can't really measure that person to person. It's gonna widely vary. So again, it's about the mentality about it.
Well, I mean, I don't think we even need to measure that if we're just talking about somebody who's eating fucking all their protein at night versus spaced throughout the day. I mean,
no, especially if you're trying to be a competitive bodybuilder, if that's the person that we're talking about, you're a fucking idiot. If you're
even somebody who's just trying to build muscle, though, it's like, why would you do that? I mean, some people, fuck it, eat 3 meals a day, best you could do, whatever. At least have protein spaced throughout those 3 meals.
You know how hard it is not only to eat 200 grams of protein, but to digest and absorb 200 grams of protein all at once versus splitting that up. That's the reason why bodybuilders eat so many meals throughout the days, because we're eating so much protein that it's just easier to digest that amount of protein in 5 or 6 meals or more meals versus having 3 meals of 250, 300 grams of protein in the day. If I was having 300 grams of protein in 3 meals, 100 grams of protein per meal, that's a lot of food. And that's a lot of protein to try to digest. And it's going to cause some stomach distension, and it's just going to be hard to digest. And it's going to affect my training.
Yeah. Well, that comes back to the whole thing, if it's your macros, is there's not a structured plan to move forward, right? Like we said with a meal plan, it's like, we have 6 ounces of chicken, 300 grams of rice, whatever it is. We know, we're either going to move up or down from this and taper accordingly. We're going to optimize our digestion, our gut to adapt to this food intake to make it easier upon ourselves. So there's not all this stress every time. If you're doing that with the random foods, if it fits your macros, how can you move up if you can't eat, if you're having a hard time digesting foods every day because you're constantly moving things around? You're not eating around the same times every day. You're eating, super late one night, then you're early the next day. Like there's not a regimen in place. And that way you're never going to be able to adapt and move forward.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to put on muscle, you need to be able to push the calories up over time. And if you're not in the process of digesting and absorbing and processing through and metabolizing those nutrients and eating and metabolizing and eating, metabolizing, and you're just eating and then you're metabolizing and then you're not having any sort of consistency within that, it's just hard to push those calories up over time because that's going to impact your digestion even more. And it's just hard to digest that amount of food.
If digestion isn't on point, that's ultimately going to affect performance, going to affect the result that you're able to make. And even if we're cutting, it's not even necessarily bulking, because now if you don't have a structure in place, you're going to be at a much higher risk for muscle loss. It's not just about, people say, oh, it's all about calories in, calories out. And from a weight loss and a weight gain perspective, yes, but that has nothing to do with retaining or building muscle tissue. If we're going to the deficit, we want to do everything we can to hold on to the tissue that we have.
Yeah. And it's going to affect your training performance, which is going to affect how much muscle you gain or maintain or lose. And then also your hunger. If you're dieting for a long time, why would you want to wait all these hours to get your protein in? The most satiating nutrient there is. You would want to get your protein in throughout the day.
Well, I don't think people would even do it intentionally. It's the fact that because there's no structure within it fits your macros, people just fuck it up every time. Like it's like they just eat shit throughout the day, and then they realize they count it up at the end of the day, like, oh shit, I only had 100 grams protein. That's what happens, and they put themselves into this fucking hole that they have to climb out of every night.
Yeah, and it's not going to digest very well if you're going to bed with 200 grams of protein in your stomach.
The key to success is always being, I don't want to say it, it's not. You always want to set yourself up for success. And if it fits your macros, it's not setting yourself up for success. You don't know exactly what you're going to eat throughout the day. You don't know how everything's going to go. When you have a meal plan, everything is set in stone, what to do. And, if you fuck that up, it's because you just didn't manage your time properly.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there also is that middle ground of not necessarily IIFYM, but it's not a strict meal plan. It's kind of, there's a time and place for it, is flexible dieting. It's not eating like an asshole and having Pop-Tarts for your carb sources every day, but it's also, not eating the exact same thing every single day. I guess you could consider
flexible dieting is basically a meal plan with options.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess it depends, like how often you're really changing the foods out. And I'd say the less, the better,
the more because again, we want to adapt to the food we're eating.
And you want to optimize digestion, and you want to know how much calories you're actually eating too. And if you're having these fluctuations in calorie intake, and you're having these fluctuations in your digestion, fluctuations in food volume, which is going to affect your body weight, which is going to be also kind of harder to measure progress. Like if you're cutting, for example, it's better to eat the same thing every single day from a bodybuilding perspective, objectively. But let's take someone who just competed in a bodybuilding show. Let's say it's their first show. They just dieted down for 4, 5, 6 months, and now they want all these foods, but they also don't want to get fat. So for that type of person who's been eating a meal plan, 6 meals a day, exact same foods every single day, besides, maybe an off-plan meal here or there, they want to have some more freedom now that they're not in a contest prep. So that, I think, is definitely a person who can benefit from doing flexible dieting, where I'm going to give them either a meal plan to follow, which that's what I do, is I'll give them a meal plan to follow and say, if you want to, you can substitute foods out for the next, 2-4 weeks, until you figure out, your groove again, and you figure out your rhythm and figure out the meal plan that you want to follow. Then we're going to stick with that. But the first week or two after a show, if you want to make some sweet potato fries for carbs and have, make some burgers out of some buns and some ground beef, and make it a little fun, because you don't need to have cheat meals every single day, but you can still hit your macros, and eat foods that digest well. That's how you flexible diet, and that can still work for that type of person. I wouldn't do that if you're on the opposite end of 2 to 4 weeks away from a bodybuilding show. Definitely not the time to do that.
Well, if you're 2 to 4 weeks from a bodybuilding show, you should have a fucking coach and listen to what they tell you. But also somebody who's competing, like, is going to know how to do this strategic. They're going to have some base knowledge of what to do, and this is what it comes back to, is people understanding, how to structure food efficiently, because we could say flexible dieting and somebody has a fucking, decides to have a burger, pre-workout, a fucking cheeseburger. And it's like, no, like that's a bad time to do that. We want fast digestion. That's why we typically stick to like rice in an off season because of the ease of digestibility. And like there could be not necessarily got a prep, but in a cutting phase, there could be more. We could make a case for having that more flexible dieting those options in place because they're not super serious in a prep, but we're not as concerned with them swapping rice out for sweet potatoes because now it's going to make them more satiated and not able to push food. Like, no, that's not really what we're concerned about. As long as they're comfortable with it, either they're able to stick to these portions and whatnot. Have some type of lean meat, whitefish, chicken, whatever it is. We could definitely have more flexibility within that without an issue. But in an off season, I think it's like I don't want to tell somebody you could swap these carbs out for potatoes or oatmeal because then it's like okay, now they're not fucking hungry.
Yeah, and yeah, so it's going to affect your satiety, and that might also affect your calorie intake, make it hard to get your food in. But the main reason why IIFYM can be beneficial or can be harmful is based on digestion primarily, I would say. So if you're, like you said, if you're not having if you're having a burger pre-workout, that's not the way to structure your diet. It's not just about the macros.
Yeah, no,
It's digestion also plays a role, and digestion has to do with training performance. It has to do with just digestion in general because it's going to affect your next meal and then your next meal and the next day. And over time, it's going to add up. So digestion is very important in the long run and the short term.
affects how you're able to absorb the nutrients that you're even intaking.
If you're not digesting it well, you're not absorbing it well.
Yeah.
And if you're not absorbing it well, you're being a shitty bodybuilder.
Yeah, well, that's the biggest thing we see all these kids do, and I guess you could get away with a lot of shit when you're a beginner, when you're a kid. You see the kids eating frozen pizzas, fucking super pretzels. I did that shit. I did it sometimes. Fucking just fuck it. I'll have fucking 3 glasses of milk. Just protein. It's like no, and then you just fucking you're shitting your brains out. And you're like, what the fuck? And you don't even think anything of it. But then, like now that we are fucking experienced, we know like that's fucking just absolutely horrible and just counterproductive to your goal.
Yeah, I would say though, when I was a kid, I feel like just kids in general, their digestion is more resilient than someone who's a little bit older.
Yeah,
So
it'll get worse over time. It'll definitely get
exactly.
worse.
So you might have, let's say there's gonna be some kids in here being like, oh, my digestion's fine. I don't even notice like if
Yeah,
digestion's first of all, your digestion might not be fine, and you might just not be like realizing, oh, why do I have diarrhea? And just being like okay with having it, or having more gas and just thinking it's funny that you're farting. Like there's a reason why your digestion changes. You're more bloated, you're having different types of poops, more or less gas, different smells of gas. So what you eat affects those things, and that's going to affect your body on the inside also. So if let's say you're not having those digestive changes, it still is not going to be good from a bodybuilding perspective to be eating these shitty foods, even if your digestion is fine.
for all the
Because
reasons we just listed.
yeah, so like eating a bunch of Uncrustables and uh, ramen and SpaghettiOs just to get your carbs in, like you're going to be getting in not only a bunch of shitty ingredients which are bad for your body in the long run.
Yeah, yeah, because we haven't even touched on like just internal health and fucking not
Yeah,
trying to prevent like cancer and all that shit.
another thing, and I think another big topic to cover. We're not going to cover that topic, but another point to bring up is insulin sensitivity. So if you're just slamming yourself with a bunch of carbs at once, you're not going to be able to absorb all of those carbs into the muscles easily as if you were to either spread out those carbs over a longer period of time or slow the digestion of those carbs, because there's only so much glucose that your muscles can absorb at a time.
I
So
didn't even think of that. Yeah, that's another good point of a meal plan because you want those periods where blood glucose is low, spaced
yeah,
out between you want them spaced out. That's why you don't really want to be snacking in between every meal and constantly have these elevated blood sugar levels. You want that period in order to help improve insulin sensitivity. Otherwise,
want to keep insulin as stable as possible, but obviously it's going to increase when you eat food. It's going to decrease when you're fasted, when you go a period of time without eating. But you don't want to have huge fluctuations in insulin because that's going to negatively affect your insulin sensitivity, which is going to negatively affect the amount of carbs that you can uptake into the muscle. And it's going to potentially cause you to store more carbs as triglycerides in adipose tissue or fat, and also it's going to negatively affect your ability to get a pump as well.
yeah. Well, that's another thing is that with the making substitutions again, This all comes back to like understanding nutrition. If you're somebody who doesn't understand nutrition, like this is something you really should just be like studying. If you're trying to get into fitness, like you should take the time to learn just about proteins and carbs and fats, at least like fucking just watch some YouTube videos. But like certain carbs are more easily converted to be stored as fat, then they're not going to be converted to glucose. Like we know, like if you have like sugar with like a bunch of fat, it's going to be much more easily stored as fat than it is to be likely converted to glucose.
Yeah, and then just also how slow it digests. So if you take, let's say, complex carbs versus simple carbs, so carbs that have fiber with them versus sugar. So whole grain bread or potatoes versus candy. The slower digesting carbs that have fiber, the complex carbs, they're going to have a slower trickle from your small intestine, so stomach and the small intestine into your bloodstream. And so it's going to require less insulin to take it into the muscle. So let's say if you have the muscle, you have these glucose receptors, the GLUT4 receptors, and you only have so many glucose receptors and so much proliferation or duplication of these glucose receptors. If let's say you have a shit ton of glucose coming into the bloodstream with a shit ton of insulin, and let's say you have 20 glucose and 10 receptors, you can only absorb so much of those glucose into the muscle. What's going to happen to the rest of them? They're going to stay in the bloodstream, which could eventually lead to type 2 diabetes, but eventually they're going to be converted into triglycerides and stored as fat.
Yep.
And then if let's say you also do the opposite, let's say you do the opposite and you have a slower digesting carb. So if you have, let's say, whole grains, or if you have vegetables with your meals, or you have more fats with your carbs, now you're going to have less carbs coming to the bloodstream at a time. It's going to take longer to digest them. So you have a lower blood sugar spike, meaning you're going to have less carbs coming to the bloodstream at a time. You're going to have a lower insulin spike because less carbs are in the bloodstream, obviously. And so let's say now you only have 10 glucose molecules at this time, and you have these 10 glucose receptors. You can store all those, and then the rest of the glucose molecules come into the bloodstream, and then you can store more of those into the muscle, and that's how you can get even fuller. And that's the reason why somebody who is less insulin sensitive and has more body fat, which there's a whole process of that, how that happens, they're not going to be able to, me, for example, I can't store a huge cheat meal onto the muscle because I'm not as insulin sensitive as if I was completely peeled and depleted, where I have no body fat on me and my muscle glycogens are very low. I'm going to have a more super compensation effect where the muscle's gonna be like, oh, it's gonna be starved. It's gonna take even more carbs into the muscle and stretch out even more to where I'm able to store even more carbs in that state versus however much I can store right now, even if I was depleted with higher body fat. And so that's a huge reason why insulin sensitivity matters, because that's also going to affect your training and therefore building more muscle in the long run. So maintaining insulin sensitivity is very important in the long run for building muscle.
I mean, you kind of like touched on like sensitivity in one aspect. I don't want to, because like that opens a whole new conversation. Maybe we'll just do another podcast talking about insensitivity. That's a good idea. But okay, yeah. So how do we even get into that? What the fuck were you talking about before that?
Having huge IIFYM and having just all your carbs all at once, something like that, that's going to negatively affect your insulin sensitivity.
Yes.
You want to spread out your meals throughout the day.
Yeah. So ultimately, what's it called? The conclusion is that if it fits your macros is ultimately going to be less effective in every scenario. Follow a
9 out of 10 times.
Yeah. Follow a fucking meal plan if you want to maximize results. Learn about nutrition so that if you don't have a coach, you can make, substitutions, educated substitutions on your own so that you're not always stuck to this monotonous thing and you always have to eat chicken. You could sub it out for tilapia or something. You're gonna say something?
Yeah, I just thought of another thing is if you're tracking your macros, I did say
they're wrong. They're always wrong.
So I did say that part, but also the person might be wrong also. They might be tracking their food wrong.
They're almost always doing that too.
They could be tracking their chicken as raw. They could be tracking their rice as dry. They could be tracking their food completely wrong and thinking they're eating this amount of macros, but really they're eating this amount of macros.
Let's think about a meal plan. Okay, keep going.
And so if let's say they're trying to eat 5,000 calories per day because they're bulking and they're having different foods every single day to hit that macro and calorie goal. If they're tracking, let's say 3,000 calories worth of rice one day, and then they're having 3,000 calories worth of a different carb source like bread, but the rice they're tracking wrong, or the pasta they're tracking wrong, they're going to have a different calorie intake, even though they think it's the same.
Yeah.
And that obviously consistency is not beneficial. So
Well,
it
that's
gets rid of user error if you follow a meal plan.
yeah, and that's the thing with the meal plan. Like there is no room for error as well. Like on the meal plan, like, at least on my meal plans, I'm sure you do this too. It's like you specify way cooked, way dry for these specific foods, and you don't use macros. You don't use calories. It doesn't matter. I don't need. We don't need to track it. We're gonna have this volume of food, and we're gonna fucking taper up or we're gonna taper down. And like obviously, like me and you, like we know what we're working with. Like we know the averages. It's never gonna be 100% exact. But I can look at a meal plan and be like, okay, this is like 300 grams protein, around 33,000 carbs. And if I did the math, like it would always be pretty much fucking spot on. But have you ever, I'm sure, I don't know if you've ever had a client do this, but you ever have clients like come to you and their kids or people that are like, I eat like 4,000 calories. And you put them on a meal plan because I'll never fucking start a kid on that when he says that. I'm like, yeah, there's no way because there's no way you could even handle the food. And you start them maybe like, I'll start him like 2,700 calories. And he can't even eat the plate. He can't even eat the meal plan because his digestion just sucks. He can't actually eat food. He's used to eating fucking frozen pizza and shit to get those calories.
Yeah, definitely. What I usually do is like they'll tell me what the macros are, they'll tell me how many calories they've been eating, but I don't really care because I don't give them macros to follow, or I don't track the meal plan of what I'm following. What I do is I ask them what they eat in a day.
Yeah.
And so they'll take me through their average day and they'll say meal one eat this, meal two eat this. And so I'll see what happens when they actually eat that. Or I might make some changes, obviously. If they're eating 10 eggs in the morning, I'm gonna make some changes to that. But that happens a lot. And then I'll see how does their body respond being consistent to this set diet, and then seeing how their body responds. I can make changes over time when necessary, and
Yeah.
then that way you don't need to know what the macros are. The only time you'd ever need macros would be with the flexible dieting approach, which a lot of people don't even need to use that. It's a time and place for flexible dieting, and if you're starting with a coach, they're trying to learn your body, and if you're having all of these moving parts, you're having all these changing variables of fitting in this food and fitting in that food and going out to eat and doing all these different things and not being consistent to your diet, not only are you going to be slowing down your progress, but it's going to make it harder for the coach to learn your body.
Yeah.
And it's going to be harder to make progress.
I've never even seen a coach, a bodybuilding coach, at least like an actual bodybuilding coach, give macros and calories on a meal plan. I've only seen it from like influencer coaches, right? I've never seen a protocol. Every coach I've had and other people I've seen, I've never seen them fucking give macros or calories.
So my last coach from my last bodybuilding show, what was it, 2-3 years ago? He only gave macros. I asked him to give me a meal plan, and he would not give me a meal plan because he said it's illegal to give a meal plan, to prescribe a meal plan.
Oh, fuck that guy. Fuck.
Hey, I can't say that shit about him. I got good benefits from him, but I would say that I would have benefited better from. Well, I made my own meal plan, so he would give me the macros, and I just made my own meal plan, which I think is a beneficial way to do it if you know how to do that. If you know how to structure a meal plan, because obviously I've been doing bodybuilding for a long time. I knew how to make a meal plan that best suited my needs, where I was eating 5 or 6, probably I think I was eating 6 meals a day for that entire contest prep, and eating the exact same foods the entire time, not making any changes until maybe refining the variables. So maybe started out with a little more fun foods like.
Yeah, but you had to do that throughout a whole prep.
It was very tedious, and I would not recommend that. And
that kind of, yeah.
Even for, I don't want to talk shit about that method, that coach, but just being completely objective, and I hope he's not watching this, but being completely objective, it placed more stress on me trying to figure out how much food to eat from him giving me the macros. He would tell me to eat 50 carbs in this meal or 200 carbs or whatever. And I'd have to track the amount of rice and figure out exactly how much rice that is to equal that amount of carbs, fats, and protein that he gave me for that meal, versus telling me to just eat 200 grams of rice, eat this amount of nut butter, this amount of beef, whatever.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Honestly, if you're a coach and you don't give meal plans, I don't want to say anything crazy, but you should be giving fucking meal plans if you're a coach. Like that's literally part of your job. Like you should be giving meal plans, doing macros,
especially if you're giving PED protocols.
Yeah,
you're a meal plan because it's illegal. Like
fucking, you give me fucking trend, but you won't tell me how much chicken to eat. I think that's really just being lazy. Honestly, at the end of the day, and even like that's fucked from like a contest prep perspective, especially because like some people might listen to that, oh, like that's great. Like I would be fine with that, it's no problem. But like when you're in a contest prep, like the last thing you want to do is have to think about what the next move is constantly. You're paying somebody else to tell you what to do. And if something goes wrong, like it's on them. Okay. Like it's your coach's fault, like they fucked it up, whatever. But like, you know,
And it
that
leaves
just puts so much more stress on you.
Yeah, it leaves more stress on me, and then also it leaves more room for error on myself because now I'm having to calculate this stuff and plug it into my fitness pal. And what if the amount of stuff that I'm plugging into my fitness pal is not the same amount of macros that he wants me eating?
And you're
Like,
also
yes, there is consistency with it because I'm eating the same thing every day, but still, like, what if it's
well, yeah, you were consistent with it every day, but somebody else could have done that. And like, prep gets to you psychologically. Like you could have fucking said, oh, I have to eat 100 grams carbs today. And like, you could have had like one meal. Okay. Like I'm just going to have fucking, a Hershey's bar now and just count this. And like, you can justify it in your head. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One day I did that. I went to like this like market and got these little like sushi rolls and like a protein bar or something instead of one of my normal meals because it fit the macros. And he was like, oh yeah, totally fine. Because it fit the macros. But in my head, I was like, this is, I would say no to my client if he's in a contest.
Hell no. But that would fucking, that'd be like a red flag for me. Again, like it's different, somebody who's just trying to lose weight, average person, or somebody bulking, they're just having a chocolate bar. All right, no big deal. But if it, like, I would want my coach, if I said, hey, I have a chocolate bar in prep, to fucking scold me, be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're a loser. That's like, honestly, that's the response I would expect. Like, I expect you to hold me to a higher standard. I should be fucking held accountable for this. I mean, obviously you have to hold yourself accountable, but if you're telling your coach you're cheating and he's like, okay, like it's fine. Like as long as you get these macros, I don't like that.
I agree. Yeah. There was a lot of things about that prep that I disagreed with, but that was a big one.
But yeah,
so I went 6 weeks with no carbs, eating 1,500 calories and doing 15,000 steps. I tracked a lot of steps, and I was doing an hour on the Stairmaster every day. And I was natural too, so I just got skinny. I just lost all my muscle and fat, and I was still fat on stage.
Yeah.
So yeah. It was a learning lesson for a prep. That's what it was.
Yeah, you live and learn. Like I was saying before, with the whole kids who can't. That was actually like that was me at one point. I remember there was a point where like I was, fucking loving Rich Piana, fucking Ben and Jerry's, right? Fucking keto. I fucking had the Ben and Jerry's pint every night. I was eating like 4,000 calories. I thought I was getting fucking big, right? But then I started working with Guy Cisternino. I worked with him. He wrote me out a meal plan. I was like 17. I looked at the meal plan and I was like, this is no fucking food. I counted it up. I did the fucking thing that like the annoying client does. I'm like, hey, this is only 3,000 calories. And he's literally like, he's like, shut the fuck up. He didn't say like, shut the fuck up. But he was like, I bet you can't even eat this much. I couldn't even fucking eat it. Like I literally couldn't eat it. I was like 8 ounces of steak. I was like, what the fuck? It's crazy. But like, really, like that's how you need to eat. That's obviously like how I eat now. But people don't realize like, just because it's not just about the number, right? You need to be able to actually eat food, quality sources of food, the volume of food. You need to be able to digest that and put it down. You have to have that adaptation build up to it. You can't just fucking be focused on the numbers. People just want to jump in. Oh, I need 3,500 calories. Like, do you though?
Yeah. And also your body's ability, like let's even talk about like the stomach and the process of digestion. The stomach is a muscle. It's made of smooth muscle, and smooth muscle also hypertrophies. So being able to digest a large amount of food, you have to build up to that, just like with, getting stronger in the gym. So if you're taking kind of the easier route of just eating a bunch of pizza or a bunch of shitty foods to get the calories in, then it's going to be harder for you to eat a lot of foods that don't cause digestive problems, because eventually you're going to run into digestive problems no matter what if you're eating a bunch of shitty foods. And we already talked about how that's not beneficial for bodybuilding.
It doesn't even have to necessarily be like quote unquote shitty foods. Like it could just be like the food choices they have and like how they're saying like I'm gonna just kind of have Fairlife shakes and fucking pasta, like just like random shit. They might be considered like good foods, but it's like there's no structure to it and like it's just all over the place and they are not able to build or adapt to anything.
I'm talking about like foods with a bunch of added ingredients that are known for causing digestive problems. So like fake sugars, seed oils cause more inflammation.
Even red meat, dude. I don't think people realize it's like red meat is very inflammatory, and that's why it's important to get organic, like grass-fed fucking red meat. There's a 9-day difference between like regular fucking red meat that you would get from like Walmart and like actual grass-fed fucking red meat. It's a huge difference. Same thing with eggs too.
Well, taste-wise, definitely. So with beef, animals store all their toxins that they get from, the dirt, from their bugs, from the grains that they eat. If they're fed a grain diet instead of a grass fed diet, they store all those toxins in their fat.
Yeah.
So if you're eating ground beef that is, let's say, 85 15, 90 10, 93 7, and it has fat in there, and you're eating grain fed, you're potentially eating some, shitty beef. And if you're eating grass fed, it's going to be a little bit cleaner in terms of the health aspect, which can affect the taste. And with eggs as well, you'll notice the yolks are darker. And it's because they're pasture raised. They're raised in a pasture. They're eating bugs and they're eating these like their actual normal diet versus fed grain, because of industrialism.
Yeah.
And that's why their yolks are more micronutrient dense. They have more beta carotene in them, which is what makes them orange. And so it's same thing with the pennies add up to dollars. It's the
Yeah, I
eating
really
the
want
right
to
quality food.
I want to like emphasize like that is very, very important because right now, if I was listening to this and I was like 17, 18, you know, people don't have money. They're broke. And I would have been like, fuck that. Like, is it that big of a deal? And it's like, it does make a fucking difference. And it's like, I've been there, eating, like buying the cheap meat, buying all that stuff. And like, there is a difference. It is worth it. It is not, it is worth it to pay the extra money when it comes to the shit that you're eating every fucking day. It is 100,000% worth it.
Now I have a theory. So the common understanding is that saturated fat and cholesterol are incredibly unhealthy and cause cardiovascular disease and atherosclerosis, cause the buildup of LDL cholesterol within the walls of your arteries. That's what studies have shown. That's what schools teach. That's what most people believe. But how come people eating the carnivore diet are usually healthier and also don't have cardiovascular disease and atherosclerosis, but these people that are eating, I'm not even gonna say what they're eating, people that are fat, people that are diabetic, people that are obese, they're the ones that see these health problems. So insulin sensitivity plays a role in that, but also what if it's the actual quality of the saturated fat that you're eating? Grass-fed beef, where those the fat in that beef is cleaner, it's healthier,
It's
versus
non-inflammatory.
probably not as inflammatory as grain-fed beef, where
Yeah.
who knows what's in that? Who knows what that cow was eating? Number one, and then also the life that it lived. You know that when you're in a stressful environment and
It's
you're
cortisol.
depressed or cortisol is higher, you're going to be unhealthier. So these cows that are, and this is the reason why raw milk is illegal, by the way. So these cows that were put into these little sheds or shacks or whatever in a factory, row by row, they're living a shitty life, higher cortisol levels, not living in, their normal habitat where they're able to have less stress in their life. And so, how do you think their internal health is? So, why would you want to be eating an unhealthier animal versus a healthier animal? How is that going to affect your health? It's the chain of energy, and that also relates to raw milk and why it's illegal is because people used to eat. This is a whole other tangent, but people used to drink cow's milk all the time, and we're totally fine until industrialism came in and capitalism and all that in America, and then they wanted to reproduce all these cows and make all these cows into factories, and the same exact thing as what I was just saying, and feed them a shitty diet, and then people started getting sick all the time, and that's why they made raw milk illegal, is because it was making people sick from the bacteria that's in it, but it's really because of the unhealthy cows, not because of the milk, because it's raw, and
Yeah.
so. Louis Pasteur created the pasteurization process of heating the milk really quickly and then cooling it so that it kills bacteria, so that now all the milk on the shelves is just pasteurized milk. It's milk that has dead bacteria floating around it all like everywhere.
Yeah.
And
It's
raw
great for you
milk,
though if it comes from a good cow.
exactly. And so that's why raw milk is becoming more popular, is because these farms that have healthy cows eating a normal grass-fed diet have healthy milk with healthy bacteria in it. And so when people drink that, they're not getting sick.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why there's still a risk of it, because if the cow is unhealthy and living a shitty life and having a shitty diet, then yeah, it's going to negatively affect them. But I drink raw milk and I don't get sick, and it tastes amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Fuck. What did you say? What were you just saying before that?
Grass-fed beef versus grain-fed beef, saturated fat, cholesterol.
Oh, I don't think cholesterol is not an issue. LDL is not an issue unless if HDL is in range,
Yeah.
cholesterol is not an issue.
Yeah, that's why I hinted at insulin sensitivity. So if you take the standard American who has a shitty diet, they're eating a bunch of seed oils, they're eating a bunch of
Yeah, that's another thing. Hold on, I was gonna say this because the people always say that like on the fucking BMI scale, bodybuilders are obese and they're still obese. Like I've seen TikToks about this all the time. Well, is one really more unhealthy than the other if they're both like absolutely fucking yes, without a fucking doubt, obese people are 100 times more unhealthy than a fucking bodybuilder.
Well, yeah, obviously. There's still going to be like stress on the organ, stress on the heart
Yes.
to hold more muscle on you, or whether it's fat or muscle. But obviously, if it's fat, it's going to be unhealthier.
Yeah.
And how did you get fat? Oh, maybe from having an unhealthier diet. How is that going to affect your organs? So obviously, that's another reason why they're unhealthy. But yeah, the reason why people end up getting cardiovascular disease and atherosclerosis is not just because they're eating a bunch of red meat. They're not eating a bunch of grass-fed beef and grass-fed steak and pasture-raised eggs and grass-fed butter, and now they're unhealthy and they're getting cardiovascular disease. That's not the reason why. It's because they're eating, McDoubles and Big Macs, and they're eating these chips and all these things, and it's those fats which are going to increase LDL, but also their lack of exercise. Exercise is the best thing. Exercising your heart is the best thing to increase your HDL. And so if you're having a low HDL from not exercising and a high LDL, that puts you at risk for atherosclerosis. And also
I think people in the fitness community are so disconnected from like fucking reality. Like I don't want to sit here and say that like bodybuilders like are healthy because bodybuilding is not healthy, but realistically, like most bodybuilders are fucking way more health conscious than 99% of the people on this planet. And like the only unhealthy aspect that comes from it is like the weight that you hold and like the gear, right? And a couple people die from bodybuilding, right? I'm not taking anything away from them. Like, yeah, people die and everybody makes a huge deal out of it, rightfully so. Like somebody died, it's tragic, but people act like all this stuff needs to change. Bodybuilding is so unhealthy. I just looked this up right now. How many people do you know that fucking die from bodybuilding? You probably count on like two hands, right? That happened in the past few years. Almost 3 million people die every year from fucking obesity. It's not even fucking comparable. Like, yeah, people freak out. People freak out. Oh, bodybuilding's gonna, everybody's dying. Like, what do you, like, fucking 5 people died, man. What are you talking about? Like, obviously it's gonna happen. Like, it fucking sucks. It's tragic, but like, compare that to obesity. It's not even comparable.
People are going to judge a bodybuilder so hard for taking steroids because they're illegal and because of the stigma behind them and how they're unhealthy, which they are, but they're not going to bat an eye for somebody going into to the drive-through at Taco Bell or McDonald's. That's normal. Or getting drunk every weekend. That's normal. And eating a shitty diet, not exercising, not going to the gym, and being fat. That's normal. So they're not going to think negatively on them. That's like,
wow. One guy dashed in bodybuilding. They're like, yeah, see, this is why you shouldn't do that. It's like,
Roy's, he's going to die at 30, and just like, it's crazy. And then this dude's got a fucking beer belly. So it's a huge just misconception.
Like, any smart bodybuilder is getting, routine lab work. Like fucking, the majority of people will go their entire life without getting fucking lab work. Again, routine lab work every fucking 4 months or so, maybe 6 months, just depending on the person. We're eating the best possible foods. We're on top of our health. The only thing that comes with it is like you're taking gear, which is just to push your body to a fucking super physiological state and get past your natural limits. But like,
it's a necessary evil for what we want to do with our lives.
Yes.
And our careers. So like I'm trying to live the life I want to live and also, be successful monetarily and financially. So this is just on my path to being as successful as possible. So it's just a necessary evil of what I have to do. But I'm taking all the precautions that I can in order to mitigate those risks rather than just being lumped in that same category of taking steroids as the guy who just blasts a bunch of gear, barely knows how to train, has a shitty diet, and has obviously, terrible health. I'm taking my health supplements. I'm doing cardio here and there. I could do more cardio. I'm still doing cardio. I'm training. I'm eating a very healthy diet. I'm not going out and eating a bunch of shitty foods. So I'm taking all this necessary steps in order to mitigate the risks of the thing that I kind of have to do in order to get to where I want to be in life and be as successful as I possibly can.
Yeah.
People don't see it that way. They're just like, oh, you're taking steroids, you're a cheater. Yeah. Oh, you're unhealthy. And it's just like,
well, you accept the risk. Obviously, like it's not healthy, but the point being is just like you can't, like people always make that comparison. It's not comparable, like at all. Like it's like we are very health conscious. It's like we just accept the fact that aspect of it, there's going to be a risk with it. But I think the risk overall within that, when you're actually, monitoring stuff and being conscious of your health, it's a lot safer than being fucking morbidly obese and eating McDonald's every day.
Exactly. But people don't think that way.
no. Well, there's just not research on it. There's not enough research. So they want to see the paper. They want to see the study that comes out that says bodybuilders on trend are fucking healthier than all obese people. That's what they're waiting for when that fucking what is it, NCBI study? What is it? Is that the site? PubMed?
PubMed, yeah.
Yeah. See a PubMed study that comes out. Maybe we'll do the fucking study. All right. Back to meal plan versus the free macros. Did we cover everything? Is there anything else to cover here? I don't want to make this a fucking 3-hour podcast again.
Almost is. Let's see. I think we basically covered everything. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll wrap this one up. Let's talk about insulin sensitivity next one. We'll make that one more in depth about that. Every time I talk about that on TikTok, people seem to be very interested in it. So we'll cover that more in depth and talk about, why it happens, how you go about fixing it, why it's an issue, all that good stuff. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. See you later, Adam.
See ya.
And we'll see you next time on Brass Tack Bodybuilding. Peace out.